Well, good evening, Hope+Elim. It is so good to have you here. Congratulations on just braving the weather today. All the snow and the wind and everything else. It is so good to see so many of you out here for our Ash Wednesday service. And welcome to our Ash Wednesday service. I find it particularly interesting, honestly, that was asked to speak for Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is relatively new to me in general. I grew up in a non-denominational church. Like, there was Christmas that we recognize, and there was Easter, and anything else on the liturgical calendar, I grew up being completely oblivious to. Like, I'd heard the phrase Ash Wednesday, and I heard the phrase Lent and stuff like that, but it was never a part of my yearly walk with Christ until relatively recently. And let me tell you, I feel like as something that I have experienced over the last several years, that it really is an important part to our faith. It really is an important part to the road to Easter. So I'm so thankful that you're here. For some of you, maybe your experience was like that, where Ash Wednesday is like a relatively new thing for you. For others of you, that's something that you've experienced since you were a child. And whether it's something that you experienced as a child, or maybe this is your first ever Ash Wednesday, it's probably good and healthy just to review what Ash Wednesday is all about. What is Ash Wednesday? And in a really short, maybe oversimplified definition, Ash Wednesday is a time to remember our mortality and our need for renewal. It's a time to remember our mortality and our need for renewal. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound very positive and encouraging to me. You know what I mean? Like, that sounds nothing like the Christian radio jingles that I hear on the radio. Like, there's something about that where it's like, that's a really sobering thing to think about. And yet, here, we do this every year. Like, isn't that kind of odd? Like, this sort of sobering day, we actually put it on the calendar every single year, and every single year we observe Ash Wednesday. We put on the calendar a time to remember our mortality and our need for renewal. So, why in the world would that be something that we'd put on the calendar? Like, can't we just stay with like the fun part of our faith? You know, like there's a lot of, I don't know if you've known this, but there's a lot of really like awesome, fun stuff about Christianity. And we're coming up on it in a couple of weeks, so like stay tuned. But like there's some really amazing things about Christianity, things that are like worth throwing a party about. And if you know anything about Hope+Elim, we are really good at throwing parties. We love throwing Jesus parties. I mean, last Christmas, Easter that's coming up, VBS might be the biggest of all of the parties. Like, we just do a 5-day party right alone. Like, we're really good at throwing parties, and we love throwing parties. And yet, we still put this day on the calendar, Ash Wednesday, a time set aside to contemplate our mortality and our need for renewal. So why is this? I want to give maybe 2 different reasons why that's the case. I don't know if you've known this about life, but confronting mortality is not something that we really want to do. It's something that, for me, I would rather avoid in a lot of cases. But here's the thing about life. It doesn't really matter if you confront mortality or not. At some point, mortality is going to confront you. And what Ash Wednesday is saying is, let's not put our head in the sand. Let's not pretend like life isn't exactly what it is. Let's look at life with a clear eyes and a clear mind and look at it straight on. And let's put it on the calendar every day to remember exactly what our life is like. Another reason why, too, I mean, we have contemplating mortality and also remembering our need for renewal. The good news is that like renewal's coming. Renewal's on the way. So this day we call Ash Wednesday is really a day of mixed emotions. There's like this duality that's happening right now where it's like, oh, we know what's later on in the church calendar, and we really want to get to that Jesus party coming up. But also there's this time of recognizing and confronting our mortality. It's a day of mixed emotions. And why would we put a day of mixed emotions on the calendar every single year for us to observe? And I think it's because life is full of mixed emotions. You've probably felt it. You can have so many different things happen in the same day, in the same week. And it's like sometimes life will just come at you and not even stop. And it is a day of mixed emotions. I want to tell you about a day I want to tell you about a day of mixed emotions that I had very recently. December 29th, 2024. Short couple days after Christmas. It was a Saturday. But in order to really get you the whole story of this, I need to introduce you to my in-laws. One of them who's here today. Let me introduce you to Dennis and Margie Yoshimura. We should have a picture of them up on the slide. Dennis was born in Hawaii. He was a Hawaii boy. And what is the dream? What's the dream of every Hawaii boy? I guess for him, his dream was to get his master's, leave Hawaii and go to Drake University right across the street and experience winter for the first time. Apparently that was his lifelong dream. And I am so glad he left a paradise to be here in Des Moines, because there he met someone named Margie Cashman, who's sitting right over there. And on December 29th, 1974, they got married. So now if you are doing the math already in your head, this last December 29th was their 50th, count it, 50th wedding anniversary. I tell people all the time that I lucked out with my in-laws. They live in Branson, but they actually stay with us quite a while. And so not too long ago, David is the eldest of the Yoshimura children. I was with him. We were at a jazz band for Kieran, his son, nephew, and I was there. And like David, I don't know if I ever told you this, Margie. David turned over to me and he's like, "So how many weeks have my parents been staying with you?" And it's like, It's been a couple weeks. Yeah, I don't know, whatever, which is like fairly normal. They live in Branson. They stay up here sometimes and everything like that. And he's like, "So how's that going?" I was like, honestly, this is no joke. This is what I said. Like, honestly, it's going great. Like, a couple days ago, I woke up and apparently our dishwasher was broken. I go to work and I come back and it's fixed. Like, it's really great. Like, it really has been awesome. And Margie, when I say that I've lucked out on my in-laws, I genuinely mean that. I say that to people in private all the time. I'm so thankful for you and Dennis. I mean, look at this picture over here where it's just those two hugging. This is 50 years of marriage and 50 years of faithfulness right there. Aren't they adorable? Like, I've had a front row seat to them, their faithfulness to each other and in their walk with Christ. No joke. I mean, you might pray for dinner every once in a while. They pray for breakfast every morning. I don't do that. I'm just going to confess that right now. I don't pray for my breakfast. I just kind of like get up and then like go on my way. So it is an honor to now be in your life, Margie. It really is. So we had this day planned for maybe over a year, that like Dennis has a huge family all in Hawaii, and we had this huge thing planned for this 50th wedding anniversary where we were all the family who lived in Des Moines, and that's everybody over on that side of the thing right there, that group picture, was going to go to Hawaii, hang out with the whole extended family, and celebrate the Yoshimura, celebrate Dennis and Margie, because this is an momentous occasion. It's 50 years. This is something else, and it had been planned for over a year. The day before that, the Friday, I got a text from my mom. She included I have 3 younger sisters as well, too. She included that. And it started off very casual. It was just like, "Hey, your dad's in some pain. Just want to let you know, I'm taking him to urgent care." Like, we're not even talking the emergency room. Was it the emergency room? My mom's here, too, by the way. It was the emergency room? All right. It was the emergency room. Not too long after that, we found out there was a huge infection in my dad's system, and we were Friday happens, it was a blur. For us, with the time zone change, I guess it was kind of later on Friday. Friday evening happens, and we're like, we don't know exactly what's going on with my dad, and we're just going to go to sleep as we get more updates. Like, if we need to take off as soon as we can, we will. And 2 a.m. on Saturday, on that December 29th, the 50th wedding anniversary, my phone is buzzing. I wake up, I answer it. It's my mom. And she's like, so here's the thing. They rushed your dad into an emergency surgery yesterday, and he has an infection spreading throughout his system, and it is already eaten up a lot of his muscle tissue, and it is spreading very quickly. There has already been 2 emergency surgeries trying to get everything out, and there is still a lot more to get out. And they're about to take him to the 3rd emergency surgery to get the infection out. I'm like, okay. At that point, it was very clear. Michelle and I are like, all right, we need to get home. Like, I need to get home to my family as soon as possible. Now, planes leaving out of Hawaii was great. Planes leaving Hawaii was great. Like, we could have got left in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. There were plenty of planes leaving out. Planes arriving to Des Moines, though, there was one, right from Denver to Des Moines, and it didn't land until the next day, Sunday, at around noon. So we were left in this very precarious situation of like it didn't matter when we would leave, we were going to arrive at Des Moines at the same time. So the choice that we had was, we could potentially be getting really bad news. Do we want to get this bad news hanging out with the Yoshimura family in Hawaii, or do we want to have it at Denver Airport? And for us, that decision seemed pretty quickly. So we booked the last flight out of Hawaii, which was 11 p.m. This meant that we got to experience this celebration and this day with the Dennis Margie and all of the family. I get another phone call from my mom. This is probably around 5 a.m. Hawaii time, something like that. I think by this time we had the flight booked. We were able to tell her like when we were going there, but my mom is one of the strongest people I've ever met. She is incredibly confident and calm. She really does worry for nothing. And I will never forget the voice that I heard from her that day, because I had never heard it before. She was really worried. She's like, Jed, they're stopping this 3rd surgery early because they're not taking out all of the infection because it looks like his heart is failing. And we don't know what's going to happen. So they're going to stop the surgery, hope that he pulls through, that his heart will make it, and then at some point try to resume taking out the infection. So my dad's score, it's quite interesting. Jason, can you go to the next slide? Here's a picture of my dad during some happy times. I was born in Wisconsin. We've both been lifelong Green Bay Packer fans. My dad is 66. He is, in some ways, the walking embodiment of Santa Claus, and you can probably tell from that photo. And it's like, your dad is always like the strongest person you've ever met, and he always was. So this idea that maybe I have already seen my dad for the last time started to really hit home. In one sense, we could, here's what my dad was facing. If he doesn't get surgery, there's a lot of infection there, and it is still spreading, and who knows how far it will spread to and how much of his body it will just take over. On the other sense, if they actually go and do the surgery, who knows if his heart will be able to survive it? It sounds like there's going to be another surgery that's going to be pretty long just to get everything out of his system. So the longer he is in surgery, the greater his heart is at risk. And this is all happening on December 29th, this 50th wedding anniversary. It is a moment of such mixed emotions. One of my sisters texted me, it was just in a group thread, of being like, Jed, how are you doing? Everybody else is in Des Moines. Everybody else is at the Mercy ICU, and everybody's together. And I'm like literally an ocean away and a continent away from my dad as this is happening. And she asked me, like, Jed, how are you doing just being so far away? It's like, it is emotional whiplash. In one sense, like, there's this amazing occasion that, like, I get to celebrate this 50th wedding anniversary. On the other side, it's like, I have no idea the next time I get a notification on my phone if this will be the worst news that I've ever heard. And I just was stunned. And my sister texted back with something that I will never forget. She said, life is both beautiful and brutal. Life is both beautiful and brutal. And I have a feeling a lot of you guys have experienced situations like that before. Maybe one day you're at a funeral for a family member, and the next day you are at a baby shower or welcoming a new family member. Maybe there have been times when you just got engaged and one of your best friends just broke up. Maybe there's been other times where someone you know has gotten, a good friend of yours has gotten promoted really around the same time that you got let go. Life is both beautiful and brutal, and maybe that's why we need Ash Wednesday. There is another story in the Bible about life being both beautiful and brutal. Would you turn with me to John chapter 11? This is the story of Lazarus. For many of you, this is a familiar story. If it's not, no worries. We'll get you caught up here. But this whole story starts off with you have Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, and these two appear to be kind of old family friends of Jesus. They've known each other for a really long time, and they have a lot of history with Jesus. In fact, they believe that Jesus is who he says he is, that he is the Messiah. Lazarus gets sick, and Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, send word to Jesus like, hey, get over here quick. He's sick. And we've seen you heal sick people before. We know you can heal our brother. Like, get over here quick and come heal Lazarus. Come heal your friend. And verse 6 of chapter 11 is like the strangest thing. It's like Jesus just stayed where he was. It's like, okay, like Jesus just stayed where he was. The Bible's not specific about what Jesus was doing at all at that point in time, but I had to think that maybe what he was doing was probably a lot of the stuff that's recorded in the Gospels otherwise. Like, he was probably teaching, he was probably preaching, he might have been healing someone. There's a chance that on the day Lazarus died, Jesus was giving someone else a brand new chance at life. Jesus was healing someone. Life is both beautiful and brutal. And that's finally after Lazarus passed away, Jesus heads over to Bethany where Lazarus was, and then he picks it up right at verse 30. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed he was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. That is the scripture's way of saying the events that are about to transpire. There was a lot of witnesses. So this is a pretty credible account. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." Now, if you know the end of the story, you know what's coming. But isn't it hilarious that, here, Mary believes Jesus is exactly who he says he is, but still doesn't know the scope of what Jesus can do. That still doesn't know the scope and the power of what Jesus is capable of. In her mind, the window of opportunity is already gone. Lazarus is dead. He's been dead for 4 days. Jesus, yeah, sure he can heal the sick, but there's no possible way that he could do anything after this. You've never seen that before. Sometimes we trust Jesus and we don't even know what we're trusting him for. Sometimes we don't even know what we're trusting him for. Jesus, his ability and his power and his scope of what he can do is greater than our scope of imagination. I don't know, you might not know the solution. You might not know the answer. Maybe in your minds you're like Mary and you're like, oh yeah, the solution is Jesus comes here right on time to heal the sick. And in his mind, Jesus has a completely different plan that's even greater and more powerful. Trust Jesus. He is worth trusting. In fact, you might not even know how much you're going to trust him for. He might do something way beyond your expectations. Then we pick it up at verse 33. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. They told him, Lord, come and see. Then Jesus wept. There's a lot of people smarter than me who have theorized and done more research to be like, why was Jesus feeling these emotions? And I don't necessarily want to go into why Jesus was feeling those emotions. I do want to point out, though, that he was. That it's just in that passage, it's like he's feeling anger. He's weeping. He's crying. Like he is, earlier in this chapter, we didn't read it, but early in this chapter, Jesus is like calling his shot already. Like he tells his disciples, like, hey, Lazarus is sleeping. Let's go wake him up. Like he's really nonchalant about it. And now here he is, and he's weeping, he's crying, he's angry. It's like, Jesus, you already know the end of the story. You already told your disciple what the end of this story was earlier in the chapter. Why are you weeping and why are you crying? What's going on here? Might I suggest that maybe it's okay to grieve? Even when you know the end of the story. I think sometimes we can believe the lie that if somehow we are grieving, even though we know that this amazing resurrection is coming in the future, like somehow our present day grief means that we don't have faith or hope or trust in Jesus in the future. And that somehow that grief is a sign of our unbelief. Here's what I think that grief is actually a sign of. I think that grief is actually a sign that you are like Jesus and that Jesus is like you. And even when you know the end of the story, the way Jesus knew the end of this story, it is still okay to grieve. You can know the end of the story, and that present loss, that present grief, that present confrontation with mortality is still difficult. You still have to work through it. It's still tough. And right now, you need to let go that somehow experiencing that grief isn't good enough. In this chapter, he's like, take me to the tomb. Take me to the tomb where my friend is buried. For some of you right now, there is an actual cemetery. There's an actual headstone, and you have been avoiding it for a long time. Because you felt like experiencing that grief means like somehow you don't have the faith. And you want to be like, oh, but I want life to just be the joy of the Lord is my strength. Even when you know the end of the story, you still have to grieve. Even Jesus did that. Be like Jesus and experience that present grief right now. You see, grief isn't necessarily some sign that you aren't living a life of victory. Grief is a sign that you are on the road to victory. Then we go to verse 36. The people who were standing nearby said, see how much he loved him. But some said, this man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? Jesus was still angry as he arrived to the tomb and the cave, and with a stone rolled across its entrance. Roll the stone aside, Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he has been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. She's right. Like, she's absolutely right. Like when you go to a funeral right now and there's an open casket and maybe the passing happened like a week ago or something like that, there's like this whole process we go through just to make sure that the body's presentable during our modern day funerals. They didn't have access to those kind of procedures back then. There was like the body of Lazarus was decomposing. So like opening this tomb is risky on a whole number of levels. Like the decomposition has already taken place. Then we get to verse 40. Jesus responded, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe? So they rolled the stone away. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I say it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so they will believe you sent me. I want you to know, he wasn't doing it just for the people standing over there 2,000 years ago. He's doing it for the people sitting in these pews right now. That's why he said that out loud. He knew Hope+Elim would happen. He knew Hope+Elim would happen. And he knew that in 2025 at 2500 University, people were going to need to remember this story, to remember what had happened so that we would know that Jesus was sent by God the Father. Verse 43, then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet bound in grave cloth, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. What must it have been like to be Mary and Martha at that moment? Their brother was dead for a full 4 days, dead to the point that that body would have been decomposing. And all of a sudden, he's walking out of a grave. Let me take you back to December 29th, 2024, just a couple months ago. You see, when I get that last phone call from my mom, I am stunned at that point in time. Like, that whole day, I was just a wreck. I was a useless human being and couldn't do anything. Michelle had the wherewithal of being like, hey, would you be all right if I, text members of the prayer team at Hope+Elim? And it's like, yes. And she's like, yeah, that would be a good idea. I'll just go ahead and do that right now. And so many of you that Saturday morning started praying for my dad. Along with everybody at his church was praying for him. And I keep hearing stories about different people who found out what was going on with my dad and how many people were praying for him. So that day was a complete blur to me. There I am. It was like I was stranded in paradise, right? We had this amazing time plan. We met some relatives that we just get along great with and talk to their children. We were hoping to spend a whole day with them later on, but now we couldn't because our trip was cut short. So at least we got to say hi. Well, we took the family and we went out to a bunch of different shops in Honolulu and just had a great time with the nieces and nephews. And then later, we had this amazing meal with the whole family, extended family too, celebrating Dennis and Margie and their 50th wedding anniversary. It was awesome. It was amazing food. I tell you what, food is amazing when you are eating it with good people. It just so happened that this particular meal was paid for by Auntie Kathy, Dennis's sister. And food is even better when you don't have to pay for it. And it was awesome. Thank you, Auntie Kathy, for that. That was a very generous gift. And the whole day, it's as if the most vibrant place on the planet, might as well have just been in black and white for me. I was in shock. I was stunned. I would get notifications from Snapchat or you need to walk more or something like that. And I'm like, is this the one? Am I about to hear what I don't want to hear? After that meal, we got word that my dad was going to go in for a fourth surgery. And it's like, okay, this is great. We're going to try to get all of that infection out there. But also at the same time, is his heart going to be able to take it? They thought this was going to take a really long time too, because not only did they have to clear out everything that was left over from that third surgery, they were pretty sure it was spreading very quickly so that it had gone somewhere else too. And they thought they knew which direction it went. So they were planning on making another incision entirely new and doing that. So I think it was something they were expecting 4 or 6 hours. This is going to be a long time. And we get this kind of late in the day, around 9 p.m. our time, something like that. And our flight leaves at 11. So I'm realizing all of a sudden that at any moment, my dad is going to be in surgery and I'm going to be stuck in an airplane with my phone completely disconnected from the outside world. And anything could happen and anything could be sent to that phone. And I'm going to have to wait hours and hours and hours until I land in Denver. And when I land in Denver, I will turn on my phone and I will have a barrage of notifications. And I have no idea what those notifications are going to say. It could be the worst news that I've ever heard. So thankfully, Michelle was able to navigate me through the airport. I was, again, just a complete mess and in shock. And we get there. It's a very big plane. There's a lot of people boarding this plane because they were there for the holidays and all that kind of stuff. We're boarding the plane. She is in group 2. I'm in group 5 or 6. So she boards the plane really early. I board the plane really late. I'm just kind of sitting there waiting. So she boards, they call now boarding group 2, hug my wife. She goes, grabs it. And I'm just stunned, kind of shell-shocked. I sit in a random chair just with my backpack and everything like that. And just kind of holding onto my phone and coming to terms with the fact that I'm about to put this phone in airplane mode. And I'm just watching other people. It's now boarding group 2. And And then all of a sudden my phone buzzes, and it's my sister Jessie. This surgery is happening like at 2 a.m. Iowa time. And one of my sisters stayed up with my mom to be with her during this time. And the text was really short. It was something like, the surgery's done. The surgery's coming out to tell us what's going on. This is way shorter than what we were expecting. Like, this is supposed to be like a 4-hour, 5-hour, like some super hyper long surgery. There's a lot of stuff to get in there. I have no idea how to interpret what I just got. And then it's silent. Then I hear, now boarding group 3. And there's nothing on my phone. Finally, my phone buzzes again. And it's Jessie once more, all caps. Guys, it's good. Nothing. Silence from the phone. Like I'm just looking at that text. Like, guys, it's good. And I don't know what's going on. It's like, now boarding group 4. And she's texting as fast as she can, like in real time, hearing what the surgeon is having to say and trying to be completely accurate with everything she's texting. And it's slowly, as I'm even boarding the plane, getting texts from her and updates. What had happened is they opened up where the third surgery had left off. The third surgery said that there was a ton of infection left over. When they opened it up, there wasn't near as much infection as they were expecting. They scope out the other part of his body that they thought the infection spread to, and all they found was healthy muscle tissue. That's it. The infection was gone in record time. Not only that, because it was such a short surgery, it wasn't near as much of a risk to his heart that a longer surgery would have been. Now, I don't know exactly what happened between Saturday morning and Saturday night, but I do know this. You prayed. You prayed. I think, and I remember sitting on that plane, like just getting it and about to turn it into airplane mode and all that kind of stuff and being like, I think I was experiencing a little bit of what Mary and Martha experienced that day when they saw Lazarus. I realized that whole day I had been letting my dad go. That in my mind, as far as I was concerned, my dad was already gone. And all of a sudden, he was back again. Like, it was no longer like this close race to the clock for me to see my dad one more time. The infection was gone. And even though there was risk, it was the first good news that we had heard the whole day. Here's what I think Jesus wants us to know here on Ash Wednesday. Hope in Jesus is greater than fear. Hope in Jesus is greater than fear. Would you help me out with that? I'll do this. I'll say hope in Jesus is, and you say greater than fear. Hope in Jesus is. Hope in Jesus is. Would you take a look at this cross for me for a moment? There's a black cloth on this cross. This is like a very traditional thing that you'll see at like a lot of Ash Wednesday services. What this black cloth represents is our mortality, but more than just our mortality. It represents everything about us that we would rather avoid. It represents our sinful nature, our habits for hurting ourselves, hurting other people, and hurting God. It represents the fact that this is a fallen world, that this is a world full of injustice and imperfection. That the world is not quite right. For me, it represents that not only did I see my dad on a hospital bed, one day I'm probably going to be on a hospital bed. That's what that cloth represents. Everything that we would want to avoid is represented by that black cloth. But here's the good news. Did you see whose cross it's on? That's not your cross, Hope+Elim. That is not your cross. Your mortality, your sinful nature, all of your shame, all of your hurts, habits, and hang-ups, it is represented on that cross, on someone else's cross. You do not have to be the one to bear all of that. So that way you can confront your mortality without fear, because hope in Jesus is. Hope in Jesus is. Here's what that black cloth represents for me and my dad. The best the world can offer, the best case scenario for this black cloth when it comes to the relationship between me and my dad is that I get to be the one to bury him. That's what that black cloth represents. What the cross represents is Jesus putting his foot down and saying, that's not good enough. Hope in Jesus really is greater than fear. Hope+Elim, what have you been avoiding confronting? This is why we have Ash Wednesday. Is it your own mortality? Is it your own mistakes, your own hurts, habits, and hang-up? Is it a secret sin? Is it a grief? Is it the mortality of someone else that you've lost that you haven't been able to process yet? I've got good news for you. Hope in Jesus really is greater than fear. So whatever it is that you need to confront, you can do it in complete confidence because it's the cross of Jesus Christ that is bearing that burden. Here's why you can confront everything that cloth represents. One, Jesus knows what it's like to grieve. He knows what it's like to just cry at his friend's funeral. Even when you mourn, when you are sitting at that funeral, when you are shedding those tears, Jesus is not looking at you with disappointment. Rather, he's mourning with you. Jesus also knows what it's like to die. He's already gone where we are going to go at some point. So that should give us courage and hope, knowing that he's already experienced and he's already paved a way because he also knows what it's like to live again. He knows what it's like to be Lazarus and to walk out of a grave. And guess what? Those who are with Jesus by faith will rise again like Jesus by faith too. Church, hope in Jesus is... So here's what we can do this Lenten season right now. And I invite the worship team to come back up to the stage at this point. There's a lot of things that traditionally happen in Lenten season. A lot of times different traditions and different faiths will go on particular diets or something like that. I would suggest pick something maybe to give up over the next 40 days. It can be something super simple, like it can be sugar. One year, I deleted the social media apps off of my phone. It's something like that. Give up a little something just as a constant reminder of what Christ has given up for you. Another thing you can do is you can also add on. So you can start to create a new habit. Maybe it's, if you've always had a hard time having a certain quiet time throughout the day, pick a time and start introducing that habit. Maybe it's like you have a little notification that goes off 2 p.m. every day of like, pray this prayer or read this verse 2 p.m. every day for the next 40 days. Here's something else too, and this one might be even more important. You see, this black cloth, mortality, all that kind of stuff is not something we should confront alone. So maybe what your only mission for this Lenten season is just finding a small group, finding some sort of social circle that's centered around something a little bit deeper than just, say, going to the bar on a Friday night. Something around the truth of the Word of God that can create an environment for you to form lasting relationships with other believers so that when mortality decides to confront you, you don't have to do it alone. And for some of you, maybe this is the time to find a therapist. Last year, I had a friend who passed away at a very young age. Some of you knew him. He was coming here for a little bit. I don't know how I would have gone through that season if I wasn't seeing a therapist. Maybe that's your application right here, right now, during this Lenten season. Find a therapist and start confronting that grief you've been avoiding this whole time. See, Lazarus and my dad, they do have something in common. Here's the funny thing about Lazarus. Lazarus is one of the few people on the planet who have ever had 2 funerals. Isn't that kind of weird? The guy had 2 funerals. He had the first funeral, and then Jesus was like, hey, come out of the grave, Lazarus, it's time. But that particular resurrection wasn't the one that stuck. He had another funeral. And it feels like right now, like my dad has been resurrected from my point of view. Like I thought for sure my dad was gone and now he's back. It would be a mistake for me to think that that is never going to be an issue again. It would be a complete mistake for me to be like, oh yeah, now he's just going to live forever and I'll never experience that sadness ever again. No, it will happen. At some point, we will confront our mortality, whether we want to or not. But here's the thing. I understand that black cloth and I understand that cross. And it's hard to confront my dad's mortality right now, but I can do it because Jesus is the one who's holding all of this together in the first place. It's not my cross that's bearing his mortality. It's the cross of Jesus that's bearing my dad's mortality. So I don't have to be afraid when I look into the future. I don't have to be afraid when I look into my dad's eyes and wondering what his health is going to be like over the next decade. I can look boldly at what is going to happen, knowing that God has got him. Hope+Elim, we are on the road to Easter. And you can walk with confidence no matter what it is that you need to confront. Just remember, whether it is a shame, whether it is mortality, whether it is any just thing that you have been avoiding, any ickiness, anything that you just want to shove into the closet, you can bring it out now this Lenten season. Take a good look at everything you are this Lenten season. Don't avoid all the evil that any of us are capable of. Don't avoid the sadness. Don't avoid the mortality. Don't avoid the loss. Look at it square in the eye. Look at it and realize everything that you are, because as you do, you will realize everything Jesus did. We are on the road to Easter. Yes, we need renewal, but renewal is coming. Church, would you please stand? I'm going to ask Pastor Brian to come up here in a moment for the words of institution, but first what will happen is you'll receive the ashes, and then you'll receive the elements. Accept those ashes with confidence today. Accept those ashes with confidence, because God's got you. God's the one holding this all together. Those ashes will be formed in the shape of the cross, and hold on to the hope of that cross. Because ultimately, hope in Jesus is? Thanks, church. Turn over to Pastor Brian.